Hello everyone, Jackson Green here again. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about something I've been researching, honestly, for longer than just the past 6 weeks. I've been looking into the story of a man by the name of Bernardo de Galvez. He was a Spanish general. Originally he started off actually as a colonel. He's a low noble son. His father, though, ends up becoming the viceroy of what we'd consider today Colombia and Venezuela. His uncle is the minister of the Indies, but none of that really matters too much except for his uncle. His uncle actually gets him into a role as the governor of Spanish-held Louisiana. I know what a lot of people are thinking. Wait, didn't France sell us Louisiana in 1803? Yes. Politic at this time is extremely weird. But Louisiana was ceded by France to Spain before the final Treaty of Paris, 1763, ending the 7 Years' War. Spain, though, had to concede Florida to Great Britain. And that's kind of where Galvez's story really takes off, is in this move to try and recapture some of the lost territory that they had. So from 1777, when Galvez was put in as governor of Spanish-held Louisiana, up until the official entry of Spain into the American Revolutionary War, which was a couple years after France. That's why we very often forget about them, as it took them 2 years to finally decide to come in. He is providing the same thing that his predecessor and many of the French governors and royal officials had for years prior. So they're sending money, arms, clothing, food to the American patriots. Once Spain joins the war, though, this is where things get really interesting, because in my opinion, Galvez is part of the main reason why the British end up coming to the negotiating table in 1783 to talk peace and to give America its independence officially. So as soon as the war begins for Spain, Galvez strikes lightning fast. He is going to take the cities of Baton Rouge, Natchez, Mississippi, and the reason he does that is he wants a little bit of breathing room. Those British forces are right alongside Louisiana, and he doesn't want to commit to anything, so he quickly attacks those. And then out comes his second major goal, which is the capture of British-held West Florida. The Floridas had been split in two. So you have East Florida with its capital at St. Augustine, and you have West Florida with its capital at Pensacola. Now, because we are all very familiar, or we might be very familiar with Castillo San Marco in St. Augustine, you might be thinking, well, why didn't he go with that one? It's because Western Florida covers the Caribbean, it covers the Gulf of Mexico. And Spain figured to themselves, at least in the words of Larrie Ferreiro, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. His book is one of the ones that's listed down below. It's called Brothers in Arms. He says that Spain felt that the Gulf of Mexico was kind of their pond. And with the loss of Florida, with so many different changes of power, they feared that Britain might be gaining a foothold in there, and they wanted to just completely boot him out. So after Galvez hits the areas right around New Orleans to protect his capital, he goes for Mobile, Alabama, or what's now Mobile, Alabama, was Mobile, West Florida at the time. He takes the fort just outside of Mobile, known as Fort Charlotte, and he returns to Havana to kind of regroup and reassess where he's at and plan for the final stage, which will be the taking of Pensacola, which he believes is kind of the pinnacle moment of the campaign on the North American continent. This is the first time that he really experiences any failure, though. He wanted it to be lightning fast, just as he had done in Mississippi, taking 3 cities in less than a month. Unfortunately, as he leaves Havana, the hurricane season of summer and fall 1780 is one of the worst on record for the 18th century. A massive hurricane hits just after they leave port. Several of his ships are sunk, and even more are sent off course. You have, I think it was 3 or 4 that actually end up docking in the Yucatan, in what's now southern Mexico, on the complete opposite side of the Gulf. That doesn't fully deter Galvez, so he has his own personal ship, the Galvez Town, which was captured by some Americans that were with him during the Mississippi Delta campaign, has to limp back to Havana to be put into dry dock. But he ends up going at it again in March of 1781. And he ends up laying siege to General John Campbell for almost 2 months. The thing that ends the siege on May the 8th, officially the surrender of Pensacola is the following day, but this is just one of those lucky shots in history. A round from one of his howitzers. I don't know if it was one of the French guns, since he had some French allied cannoneers with him, or if it was from one of his Spaniard-held and controlled weapons. But one of the howitzers fires a lucky shot of an exploding shell known as case, and it rolls into the entranceway of the powder magazine for the Queen's Redoubt, which is the outermost fortification just outside of Pensacola. And when that goes off, it is a stunning effect. Approximately 2/3 of all of the British casualties that happened during the siege happened because of that one explosion. Galvez decides to take advantage of that stunning display of fireworks, and he rushes the other redoubt and he batters the walls of Fort George, which is the main fortification that General John Campbell is hiding behind. John Campbell ends up surrendering only about 4 hours after the Queen's Redoubt explosion. Now, after this, because just taking Pensacola, yeah, okay, you can say whatever, Jackson. But after he takes Pensacola, Galvez plans for another 2 campaigns, one of which actually ends up happening. And that one is to attack the Bahamas. He ends up taking the Bahama Islands from British control, and is planning, as late as 1782, an attempt to attack Jamaica, which is Britain's last major stronghold. Now, if you're wondering why that's important, why that might bring the British to the negotiating table, it's because there are 2 major things that are true about England, and they're kind of the same thing. Napoleon Bonaparte is quoted as saying that Britain is a nation of shopkeepers. And as anyone who's looked into the period of turmoil in the Americas from the 1760s with things like the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the primary way of getting British to change policy was to hit them in their purse strings. Well, sugar and coffee. Two of the biggest crops in terms of cash and that could be had are being produced in the Caribbean. The next closest would be tobacco. So that kind of is a reason why they're still wanting to hold like the American South in the later part of the war, is to try and hold on to those markets. With the threat of the loss of Jamaica and the complete loss of the Bahamas, Britain decides it's time to come to the negotiating tables. They have figured that if France and Spain continue this war, even if they abandon the Americas, they could lose some very major sites. They could lose Jamaica. The Spanish crown has already been laying siege to Gibraltar for the better part of a year and a half. So one of the books I used for my research was Wesley Odom's Pensacola, and he claims that Pensacola was the longest siege. No, I'm sorry, the longest siege and battle actually happened in Europe, but that's not to downplay the problem of Pensacola for the British. General George Washington was actually kept abreast of all of the developments that were coming out of the Pensacola campaign by the Spanish minister to Philadelphia, Francisco Rendon. Benjamin Franklin, who is in Europe at the time, actually is writing letters saying that this man is an astounding military talent. In 1783, so at the end of the war, the U.S. Congress actually decides to honor Galvez with a portrait in the Capitol building. That does not happen for whatever reason until almost 230 years later in 2014. So before I sign off, and I know I've gone over the 5 to 7 minutes, but this is a topic that's really, really interesting to me. I would highly suggest a couple of things. Number one, if you're interested in learning more, you can message me, or you can go to www.granaderos.org. Two of the guys who really helped me with getting interested into the story of Galvez and in researching this topic come from the founding chapter of the Granada Society or Order of Granaderos de Damas de Galvez. I really, really hope I'm pronouncing that one right. I might be missing up a couple of those Spanish words. But Joe Perez and Adam Dominguez are really, really nice guys, really good friends, and they love to answer these kinds of questions. And lastly, on July the 4th, for those of y'all that are interested, I know it's just a week away, and we'll probably not be able to have the big firework parties that we were maybe planning. Check out the Alamo's Facebook page. They're going to be posting a video that I helped do the research on with Adam Dominguez and Joe Perez talking about the Galvez expedition and how it ties into Texas history and the Alamo. Until then, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful July 4th. God bless.